Love Mother Earth, protect Mother Earth. Waterways, mountains, do you know what it's worth? A whole lot. One planet, yeah, that's all that we got. Love Mother Earth, one Mother Earth. Oceans and atmosphere, know what it's worth? A whole lot. This planet, yeah, that's all that we got.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for joining. My name's Sarah Newman, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Climate Mental Health Network. And I want to first just start off by thanking the Aspire Center at Oregon State University for their generous support of our work, including tonight's webinar. And thank you to all of our webinar partners, the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, Science Moms, the National Parents Union, All Our Kin, the National Academy of Medicine, Climate Communities Network, Capita, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, Moms Clean Air Force, Children's Environmental Health Network, and the American Public Health Association. And also just a big thank you to all of our panelists, Anya Kamenetz, Dr. Tara Latham-Powell, Dr. Lisa Patel, and Melinda Wenner-Moyer. And please, throughout the event tonight, please use the Q&A function to share comments and questions. There's going to be a Q&A portion of the event tonight. And now I am going to turn it over to Jason Allen, who is the National Director of Partnerships at the National Parents Union.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you are doing well on this evening. As mentioned, I'm Jason B. Allen with the National Parents Union, better known as NPU. We are the United Independent Voice of Modern American Families, creating and implementing positive policies that impact the lives of families and children in 4 areas, including economics, education, technology, and I would say maybe one of my favorites, which is how we are confronting climate change. I'm super excited about this evening's program. We'll start with a presentation of findings from the Climate Mental Health Network, which is a phenomenal organization. They have a parent focus group finding that we will go over a very new toolkit for parents and caregivers, which we want to make sure everyone gets on this evening, followed by our panel discussion, a Q&A, a grounding exercise, and finally, we will wrap up with a brief survey. So as you heard, there will be a raffle, and we want to make sure that you stay all the way to the end of the program on this evening. Now, before we move forward, in tonight's program, we do want to take a moment of silence as across the country, we have seen tragedies on every end, celebrating the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, thinking about so many who have been displaced by recent natural disasters, thinking about the mass school shootings, and so many acts of violence that we're seeing in our society and really disrupting the way that we live. So please join us in a brief moment of silence. All right. Thank you all so much again for acknowledging this day of remembrance. As again, we also remember the lives of those lost on September 11th. Now, we want to go to a very bright note, a high note. I'm going to call on one of our very good friends. Anya is going to come on. She is a part of the Climate Mental Health Network. And listen, you all are in for a treat. She has some amazing information to go over with us that actually was collected by, guess what, parents and caretakers. And so, Anya, we'll turn it over to you at this time.
Jason, thank you so much. I am so filled with gratitude right now and inspired by the care, your partnership, your organization, all of the amazing experts, each of you whose work I know really well and respect so much, and the care shown by all the people on this call, all the people that registered and all the people that are showing up. I know that you have other things in your lives, things you'd rather be thinking about, and you are here because you care and because you want a better future for our kids. And that's so worth celebrating and recognizing. I am a journalist by training. I am a mother of 2 children, just started 4th and 9th grade. Everything I do is for them. And I am trying to figure out, as the rest of you are, how do we talk to our kids about the disasters that are out there, what we see on the news, what we try to shield them from, and how do we build resilience and stay resourced ourselves and stay connected. So that is the heart of the research that I'm sharing with you today. As we mentioned, it was supported by OSU's Aspire Center. And I'm just going to do a brief overview, and then we're going to share the real thing, which is the resources that we created in response to these focus groups. So we talked to parents all over the country, parents and caregivers. 4 of the focus groups were conducted in Spanish to understand what is their experience and what emotions are they reporting for themselves and for their children in relationship to climate change. So across 16 states. And I think one of the most striking findings, 100% of the parents we talked to said, we are seeing signs of climate change where we live. And I want you to all stop and think about what that means where you live. Is it extreme heat? Is it wildfire smoke affecting air quality? Is it winters without snow and not being able to share the activities that you did as a kid with your own children? What we're also seeing is that most parents reported that they and their children have challenging emotions about these changes, and about disruptions. And of course, we're speaking very much in relationship to extreme weather, but this also connects to other things that are happening in the news. We live in a poly crisis. So we live in a time of violence, disruption, transformation, and there are feelings that go with all of it. So with that, we found that we use the Climate Emotions Wheel, which is a resource developed at Climate Mental Health Network, which allows people to really see the full impacts that we feel in relationship to these global events. And within that, the most frequently reported emotions by parents, not too surprisingly, was anxiety for ourselves on behalf of our children, guilt at not being able to perhaps give our kids the sense of stability that we maybe we're lucky enough to enjoy or that we'd like our children to have, frustration and anger at these changes that are possibly out of our control. When turning to how our children feel, there's a very big component of anxiety. A lot of parents reported children feeling frustration. And then there's that bright spot, which is curiosity. So our children have a lot of simple questions about the changes that are happening in the world around us. And that offers us an entry point because there is, we can't protect our kids from the reality of what's happening in the world, but we can protect them from feeling alone with the knowledge. And so when we start a conversation, when we respond to their questions or their wondering and get on the same page and start to talk about not only what is happening in the world, but also the solutions, looking for the helpers, looking for the people that are working to create a better future with energy, with transportation, with agriculture, that's when we can start to have a positive conversation about what's happening. And so I'll switch over now to talking about the resources. And this is all available at our climatementalhealth.net/parents and caregivers. And it's a comprehensive resource. There's also an audio, like a podcast overview version with myself and Rachel Moskowitz. And this is a guide for parents and other caring adults. And we really designed it to have multiple entry points that speak to your specific situation. And so as you can see in the table of contents, if you're just thinking about having kids, if that in that part of your life where you have very young children, Or if your children are older, if they're already asking questions, if they're school age, if they're teenagers, they're angry, they're disaffected, they're overwhelmed. If you are facing extreme weather threats, we have very practical tips to how to build preparedness into your family culture, have an annual preparedness day. If you're surviving extreme weather, we talk to a survivor of a wildfire about how she put her family back together and her testimonies in this guideline. If your family is in an intersectional situation where you're a frontline community or you're facing racism and discrimination as well as climate effects, or if your child is struggling with a mental health co-occurring diagnosis. So there are resources and entry points and starting points for everyone along the way. And we want this to be a living document. So we're really, really hoping that the people on this call, get a hold of it, take a look, ask us questions, give us responses, because we really want this to be a starting point. Our purpose with Climate Mental Health Network is to be a connector and a convener and really help people in their communities start these conversations. The big silver lining about challenges like climate change and violence and political upheaval is that no one is alone in this. We are all dealing with this together, and we don't have to be alone. We don't have to be lonely. We can start a conversation. You can get the support that you need. The people on this call are people that care. So connect in the chat and get the conversation started. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I am super excited to get more into the resources that were provided, especially if you do not know this. September is Grandfamilies and Kinship Families Awareness Month. So as we're talking about caregivers and caretakers, again, these are resources we should be making sure that our schools, our communities have access to. Now, everyone is here for the panel discussion. I'm so excited to hear from fellow panelists who are going to share their experiences and their knowledge base. Tara, I believe we're starting with you first this evening, and I want to go right into one of the questions we have for you, which is you developed the Journey of Hope working with children in New Orleans post-Katrina. Which is a major thing. There are so many documentaries out now that are very good for teachable moments around climate change. Can you share what you've learned in regards to improving children's resilience, which is so needed right now in this time, both before and after the weather disaster?
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. And also just want to say thank you to the Climate Mental Health Network for putting on such an important webinar. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. So I had a bit of time to think about this. I've also been reflecting quite a bit because my experience in disasters began with Katrina. And I've been able to continue to work in disasters. I don't know. I think I call myself lucky, but I don't know if others would call me lucky over the past 20 years. But I would say, there are a number of things that we can do both before extreme weather event and after a weather event to really help children. So before a weather event, one of the things that I would say is really helping give children agency. So, for example, preparedness interventions that can really help young people feel like they can help their family prepare for a disaster. So when I was working with one organization, we developed a program called Resilience and Ready. We delivered it all over. It was really fun. We played cooperative games because in all of my programs that I work in, we play cooperative games to get the children engaged, but these were all around preparedness. We helped the children develop a preparedness plan that they could bring home and also discuss with their parents. And parents would come back to us and they say, my child is harassing me about being better prepared. So that was one thing that we saw before the events. Other interventions and programs that can really help is we tend to be very reactive as a society, not proactive. But there are a lot of interventions that can help build children's coping capacity, help children put words to their feelings and emotions, and really connect with others, which can build protective factors for children. And it can also help them cope with stressors they're experiencing on the day to day. But also, it can help them prepare and have the skills to manage stressors that come with instability, with large scale disasters, such as evacuation, leaving their home, being separated from school and family and friends. So, those are just some things that we can do before a weather event. So after a weather event, initially, we really want children to feel safe. Safety is one of the first key things that they need. So having caregivers help them feel like they're safe, feel like they're being supported, is first things first. But then once they return to school and getting them in a routine as well. So getting them back into some kind of routine. Um, they always try to open schools very early after extreme weather events. And that's a really good thing because it can help children get back to a sense of normalcy. But there's also a lot of stress that goes on with disasters and extreme weather events. So um, there are lots of great curricula and programs that can help children process and talk about their experiences. But one thing I did find is that the weather event might not be the front and center of where they are. So there are a lot of secondary stressors that children experience. And so that might be what's relevant to them. And we really need to meet children where they are. And that being said, some children, if they haven't had the opportunity, would want to talk about their disaster experience. And that's okay as well. But many children have a host of other stressors they're experiencing. So one thing I always heard from children after Katrina is they said, I don't want to talk about Katrina anymore. That's because they had so many opportunities to talk about Katrina and talk about their experiences, but they really wanted to talk about the things that were going on in their lives. So a lot of them were caring for younger siblings. They were separated from their family. There was community violence. So really, I found meeting them with what their needs were was really important to help them gain skills to cope, and not to tell them how do you cope, but to ask them and to facilitate discussions on what are healthy ways that work for you. And so this I found was really more effective than saying, hey, let's talk about the disaster. Um, and then I also found the power of group work to really enable children to learn healthy coping skills from each other. So social learning. So there's so many times when I was working with young kids, they would say, I didn't know other people went through this, and they're going through the same thing as I am. And seeing that they gain friendships with each other. So it was just really powerful to build those peer connections. And then finally, I can go on this on, there's so many things, but the great thing is the other panelists are going to follow up and provide lots of good, more detailed information as well. But also providing parent and teacher support programs, I think is so important. Um, you know, in these extreme weather events, most, if not everybody, has been affected. So really providing a space for caregivers, teachers are caregivers, parents are caregivers, other caregivers to talk with one another, to be provided with tangible skills and resources to be able to recover. And identify what kind of community supports are out there, because people often feel pretty isolated. And if they know they have a community, then that helps them the most. And as we always know, if you're not doing okay as a caregiver, you're not really able to care as well for your child. So caregiver support, very important. And I will stop there.
I love that, Tara. Thank you so much for sharing. And listen, the teacher and me, I wrote down the takeaway. And so I'm just going to share this with everyone really quickly. What I heard you say is that we should probably do or be more intentional about listening to our children, listening to young people, making space for this. And I also heard that maybe adults should make space for listening and talking to each other and sharing experiences and how these things connect. Now, I'm going to move us along in the program again. Tara, thank you for opening us up in that way. Melinda, we want to come to you, and you write about the importance of teaching kids not just to cope, but how to care. And that's a good connection to what we just heard, because what we're seeing in our current society is fear, not caring, not humanity, not the characteristics of Captain Planet. I'm a Captain Planet kid, so I definitely believe in that. I would love if you could share some ways that parents and caretakers, really all of us, can foster moral courage and compassion while still protecting kids and their emotional well-being.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for, I'm so honored to be here and so happy that this discussion is happening. Thank you to the Climate Mental Health Network. So, I think when we really are thinking about how to get kids to care, one thing I think we have to do is we have to really talk to our kids in obviously developmentally appropriate ways about what's going on in the world, what's going on around them, so they can understand that there are things in this world that aren't perfect and that we can work to try to change. So I think a lot of times as parents, we think that when it's possible, we should insulate our kids and protect them from information that, could be a little bit scary or a little bit intense. And of course, we, as Dr. Powell was saying, we need to make sure our kids feel safe and protected. But the fact is, they're often hearing about what's going on in the world around them from friends, from their phones, from TVs, from what they overhear. So it can often actually be better to be proactive and ask kids, what have you heard? What have you heard about, something that's happened? What are you hearing at school? And have a conversation about what's going on in a matter-of-fact way that also includes a reassurance that they're safe. Because I think, we need to have these conversations both so our kids are feeling safe and so that they understand that, there are things that they, in caring about, can do something about. So that's another thing Dr. Powell was just talking about, was the sense of agency. And it's really important to help kids recognize, where they have this agency. So if there's something going on in the world that's scary or that's, that they wish was different, then you can then pivot to, okay, well, let's talk about what can we do to make a difference? What can we do together, and brainstorm ways to get involved, whether it's through, volunteering or donating money or resources or calling or writing letters to representatives. So it's sort of like a pivot from like, okay, let's talk about what's going on, and then let's talk about what we can do about it. And that's where really getting kids to, to think about their agency, to think about change comes in. As for the sort of moral compassion part of it and building compassion, from the research, a couple of the key ways to build compassion in kids. One is to be talking a lot about feelings. So that can be their feelings, it can be your feelings, it can be other people's feelings, but talking about feelings really builds this emotional literacy, which is one of the foundations of empathy and compassion. And so this might also involve encouraging kids to take other people's perspectives. If there's something going on in the world, well, how do you think people are coping with this? How do you think somebody's feeling in this situation? And trying to get them to take, to come out of their own selves and into the brain of another person, into the body of another person and what they might be experiencing. One of the foundations of compassion is called theory of mind, which is basically this, which is the ability to recognize that other people have different feelings and experiences and thoughts that, than you do. So, really like having these conversations about other people's experience, having these conversations about people's feelings can be incredibly helpful for building that compassion. And for courage, I just want to add, I think it can be really helpful when we see our kids being brave, whether that's just like surviving the first day of school or getting on the school bus or whatever it is. Like when we can see those moments of bravery in our kids, it can be really helpful to call them out and praise our kids and say, you know what, I just saw you being really brave and really courageous. And that's awesome, because I love that even though you were afraid, you went on the bus, you went to school, and, reminding them that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's not having these feelings. It's, moving forward and trying even when you're experiencing fear.
This is turning into a very beautiful conversation. I hope people are taking notes and have good questions that we do see coming in. As a reminder, please use the Q&A section. Now, here, what I heard, my takeaway is being proactive. In our society, we've been conditioned to react to so many things we see and what's happening and impacting us mentally. So being proactive and also, you know, nothing against previous generations, but just thinking about grandparents, sometimes our aging, seasoned seniors, we have had a habit of sweeping things under the rug. And so what I heard is that let's just take the Band-Aid off and just address things with our children and young people so they're not left in the dark and have more anxiety around things that they're seeing online or being exposed to in society. Now, Lisa, let's move to you. Protecting our children, I think, is the number one thing that's on everyone's mind. People are trying to figure out ways to be, again, we're hearing the word proactive around measures and, what can actually be done. So I would love to hear from you in regards to what are some of the most let's say, protective factors for children facing climate related stress. And for those who are listening and may say children are not stressed out, and how will a natural disaster stress out children? Well, let's think of it in this sense. For families who are displaced and their living conditions are unstable, they may be living in buildings that are not safe. They may have mold. They may have conditions that are unlivable, but they're in transition, and that's their environment. That can be very stressful for children. And I think a lot of times people don't think that children have anxiety and stress, and they do. So, Lisa, we're going to hear from you on protective factors for children facing climate related stress and how real this is.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, thank you for organizing this and for inviting me. I've already learned so much. So yes, unfortunately, children do experience stress. In pediatrics, we call it toxic stress or adverse childhood events. It's the first 2 years in particular of a child's life. There's very rapid brain growth that happens during that time. A lot of connections are being built. And there's a list of evidence-based of the types of stressors that literally change the architecture of a child's brain and can place them at higher risks for a whole host of both physical and mental health diseases down the line. And some of those toxic stressors, I mean, it's what you said is what happens, right? We turn on our stress response, and we used to turn that stress response on if a predator was coming at us. But that predator looks different in this day and age. And so it can look like a caregiver that has a mental health illness themselves that might be engaging in emotional or physical abuse. It can look like housing insecurity because you're not sure if you're safe in your home. It can look like food insecurity. It can look like racism. There are so many different things that can turn that stress response off in a child, turn that on in a child, and then it stays on and results in all of these health issues down the line. In terms of building resilience for children, a lot of the things have already been mentioned in terms of, making sure that we're having conversations with kids about their feelings so they can put names to what's actually going on. I'll add to some of these others, just making sure, especially the younger the child, that you're limiting media consumption, because some of those images can be really traumatizing and difficult to have conversations around, especially if a child is younger. Some of older children might have access to those images in other forums. And so just making sure that you're keeping the lines of communication open so you can have conversations about it. I think gratitude practices, there's so much evidence around how good gratitude practices are. We pair that in our family with, we call it kindness as well. So every evening, we'll go around the dinner table. I have 2 kids, and talk about 3 things that we're grateful for, a kindness that we gave and a kindness that we received. And to this point of modeling behavior, I work as a pediatric hospitalist. So I work in a hospital setting, and we see some really tragic cases come in. And I'd had a really terrible case where I was really just crying the whole day. And so we were sitting down at dinner, and I couldn't bring myself to start the gratitude practice. And my 5-year-old took over for me. And he's like, "All right, everybody, everybody go around and say what you're grateful for and the kindness you gave and the kindness you received. And it was this moment where you don't know if the things that you're doing are working, but it was just so wonderful to see that when we create these types of rituals, we create these kinds of practices, our kids do take them on, even if they don't fully understand it. We're growing our kids towards who we want them to be. And it was just a beautiful moment for me and my husband to sort of witness. And the last thing I'll say about resilient kids is to, right? We think often in terms of disasters and then what we're going to do, but let's also think about preparing our kids, unfortunately, for a world where they are more likely to experience disaster. So how do we build their positive associations with nature? It's a little sad to me that we need to study this so much as we've had to, because we know this in our souls when we step outside and it's green and the sun is out and you hear the birds chirping. We know this from studies that your blood pressure goes down, your cortisol levels go down, children fight less in green spaces and green schoolyards, right? So what we feel and know inherently, we've actually shown in the literature as well. We understand that access to green spaces is an issue of equity. And so we should be doing our all to make sure that all children, regardless of what neighborhood they're living in, have access to these types of healing spaces. Because we know that it's good for children and it helps to build their sense of resilience.
I am so inspired from the conversation. Lisa took me back to childhood and growing up, and it also took me back, again on this day of remembrance, just remembering our country. And I may be aging myself, but I'm going to put this out here. When Lisa was sharing her experience at the dinner table, it took me back to booking with Pizza Hut. And, growing up, it was like I needed to read so I could get my booking, get my free pizza, which economically helped so many families, because I'm thinking about working families who parents may not have been able to provide dinner that evening, but my child was able to read and was excited about reading. And it created community. So my takeaway from Lisa is it takes a village. Where what we're seeing in our society is dividing people. We need to come together even more, not just for us, but also for our environment. Early childhood and development matters, which means that including environmental literacy for families and the development of children is very important. Now, I also am going to throw this out here and say, maybe you all would collaborate with the National Parents Union and we'll do a movement for recess for all. That's what I really heard in Lisa's sharing, is maybe recess for all, which is a tech-free zone. Kids are outside in green spaces, getting connected to each other, but also nature. Okay, that's just me reimagining education. Anya, let's go to you. I always love this part of the conversation when it's like, okay, we're getting really into it, and what's next? Now, we've talked about caring, we've talked about compassion, we've talked about storytelling, but let's go into mobilizing parents and caretakers. I would love if you could share some of your thoughts and also work around how can we engage parents and caretakers, mobilizing them together to support. That word to me says being a good partner with school districts to integrate social emotional learning into existing climate literacy initiatives.
Thank you so much for this question. And I'm so blown away by this panel again. And also some of the great questions that we're getting in that I'm hoping to be able to answer. But, I just think from our perspective in Climate Mental Health Network, our whole reason for being is to make sure that we're not leaving heart and soul out of the climate conversation, and that we're not leaving climate change and other big picture challenges out of the mental health conversation, because these are sort of the collective experiences that affect all of us. And, as we did our focus groups, we heard again and again from parents that they're looking for ways to connect and ways to take action. And honestly, that really mirrors what we've heard from the other panelists that our kids want, right? Our kids want connection. They want to be, they can learn those resilience tools, like Tara said, from other kids, mirroring back and forth. And also they want agency. And we're hearing also, I'm seeing in the chat as well, kids are asking for ways that are really meaningful to take action. So, you know, there are many initiatives that are in process, and there's tools and there's links in the toolkit. But, you know, just an example from that's homegrown, I'm a part of a group called Climate Families NYC, and we're a group of parents with kids of all ages, and we create family-friendly protests because you want to be able to bring your kids along to the protests, and because it's very hard to ignore. Like, we had a play-in at the governor's office in Albany, and we brought our toys and our play mats, and just let her know that we want a climate-friendly future. There's also work to bring more climate lessons into the schools and to decarbonize the schools at the same time. So not only do we want school gardens, but we also want solar panels, and we want to get rid of our boilers and get electrification in the schools. So there's efforts like this all over the place. Moms Clean Air Force is another group that we work with often. And, you know, it's really hard everybody's very busy, and we all have work and bills to pay and kids to take care of. The more that we can integrate our action into our parenting, and model for our kids that it's not all on their shoulders. But we do also, with Climate Families, we offer our kids, they can call, they can write letters, draw pictures if they can't write letters, and they can show up to protests. We've had 9-year-olds on the bullhorn in front of City Hall. So making it intergenerational and making it very joyful, at the big marches, at the small actions, is just a way to weave this thing in. And, you know, there's always an option to take action, even in a small way, even if it's a call relay or a text relay. And kids want to know that what they're doing is really going to meet the scale of the problem. Definitely being out in nature is another way to have agency. And we want to make sure that our kids get a chance to feel like they're stewards of the earth, if that's urban composting, if it's backyard gardening, as well. So making sure that we're taking action at all of these different levels.
I love that. And people have so many great questions inside of the Q&A box. And a lot of these questions, again, are centering, what can we do? A part of me wanted to go right into organizing. Major shout out to all of the NPU partners and parent leaders who are connected on this evening. I've seen some of the attendee names, and I'm like, yes, they are connected. I think that it's important. We have some bonus questions that I want to throw out here, but thinking about a lot of the questions around what can we do, I think we're doing it right now. We're having the conversations, we're sharing resources, and most importantly, we're elevating the stories of those who have not just lived through natural disasters, but those who are deeply concerned about climate change. And again, I'm raising up Captain Planet, like thinking about, you know, media programs, cartoons, curriculum that is encouraging our children to be engaged with our climate and the environment. Now, Lisa, I want to go to you really quickly. And one of the things we also can do, again, is sharing resources. What are good resources that parents and caregivers can utilize for advocacy in regards to what their schools can do, let's say, to better handle or be even more equipped for climate related issues?
Yeah, a few resources to lift up, and I did see some questions in there too about, you know, what kids could do. I had a 12-year-old reach out to me, wanting to. She said that she saw a bunch of her classmates get sick during an extreme heat event, and could I write a letter support for her to go to her school board to ask for education for her classmates? I mean, my first reaction was like, how sad that this is on her to do, but your school board is a really powerful place. And for any youth that are listening, your voice is so, I cannot even tell you how powerful your voice is. Now, it shouldn't be on you alone. That's why grown up, like adults, should be there with you. But your voice is powerful. You have adult allies to help you get over the finish line. And I'm sorry, your question to me was, again.
Well, resources that parents can
Resources,
use.
yes. So one great resource is Healthy Children's. It's a resource of the American Academy of Pediatrics. It is, I would say, more of a health-based information when it comes to climate change. I'm one of the people that's helped build that library of resources, but it really outlines all the various ways, whether we're talking about wildfires or floods or heat, why it's a health risk. And I think it can be a powerful tool for parents that are going to their local council members or to their school board to talk about why climate change is a health risk for their children. I also worked with Climate Central last year. We put out a series of resources that marries data and information with actions that you can take on climate change as it relates to children's health. So if you go to Climate Central, so there are some great resources there as well.
Awesome. Love that. Tara, how can parents and schools more deeply connect? We're looking at developing deeper connections right now with each other to foster emotional well-being, especially among students. But I also want to throw in here staff members that have to help usher in this type of atmosphere for there to be emotional well-being. So how can we, again, build more deeply uh, connected relationships with our staff members, our school leaders to foster emotional well-being for our students?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and there are definitely many ways that we can do that. Um, for staff members and for teachers, anybody who is a care provider within the school, I think just having education about what is the impact of climate-related disasters or climate change on children. There's a lot of new research that's coming out on eco-anxiety, but also there's a lot of research that's been done on, how children experience PTSD, anxiety, depression, if they've experienced a disaster. And that actually is really helpful for teachers to understand, because having that knowledge first can then help pave the way for them to provide supports. So then also teaching teachers and others in the school about basic psychosocial, psychological supports for children. How do you provide, basic, like just helping skills? We know they're not they're not experts in mental health, nor they should not be expected to be the mental health support for the child, but also understanding referral pathways. And bringing them together to learn together so that they're able to talk to parents, when parents reach out and may have concerns. I think with parents and teachers, we can bring them together more around. There could be different events, lots of different climate-related events. There could be, a preparedness events, but building that community, because schools are really this basis for community that we have within the United States. So a lot of communities built around schools, having fun events for them to go to, just to learn from each other and to provide each other support, and getting to know each other really helps reduce that isolation as well. And I have a million more things I can say, but I'm going to stop there.
Lots of resources, but thank you so much for sharing that. And again, a big part of the main question that is being asked, what can we do, is staying informed, staying connected, and sharing resources. Now, what I would say to those who are viewing, we know that under this administration, there is not a lot of support for environmental justice, environmental literacy, and climate change. And so, how is that going to look moving forward, especially as we go into 2026? And so, one of the things I would say is make sure you are connected to the Climate Mental Health Network and those organizations who are represented this evening, and also the National Parents Union. Now, there is a marriage between climate change and technology. Okay. Now, if you want to learn more about that, again, get connected with us. We'll set up some meetings and we'll help you to organize, which was one of the questions that I know Anya addressed earlier in regards to how can we mobilize parents. Melinda, I want to go to you because this is something that our national president, Kerry Rodriguez, and so many other leaders have been hearing from parents in regards to, especially today. How do I help my child feel safe in a world that feels very unsafe? Uh, what are your thoughts on this, and also what are your resources you can share to us who are on?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think, I mean, we know from the data that parents today are feeling more anxiety than they have in generations past. There's so much, and for good reason, right? There's so much fear and anxiety right now, and so much that is legitimate, and also so much that's being fed to us. There's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of information that we're getting through social media, through influencers who are, really trying to make us afraid as well of things that maybe we don't need to be afraid about. And I mean, a lot of this is for good reason. They're making money off of it. They're selling something. They want us scared. And so I think part of it is kind of differentiating, I think, between, what is truly do I need to be worried about and scared of, and what am I being told to be scared of that maybe I can take a deep breath and recognize that I don't need to be as panicked about. Um, so in terms of keeping our kids feeling safe, there is an exercise. I think this is, by the way, paramount, that in any conversation we're having with our kids, which we've talked a lot about being open with our kids and talking about current events and talking about the scary things going on in the world, which is really important because who knows what they're hearing elsewhere that might be inaccurate, that might be even, scarier than the way we would present it. We do, though, need to take a lot of care to not overwhelm and terrify our kids while we do this. So as we're sharing and as we're having these conversations, we do need to ensure that our kids feel safe, as we've heard several times today. And I guess the one thing I would add, there was an exercise that a psychologist told me about when I spoke with her on this topic a while ago that I just loved, which works, I think, with little kids, and it could work with older kids as well. But she said, okay, on a piece of paper, draw like a stick figure and say, okay, this is you. Let's talk about who's in charge of keeping you safe. And then you engage with the child and you say, okay, who's here to keep you safe? And of course, there's, there's, grandparents, there's teachers, there's other relatives, there's friends, and you kind of create this whole visual representation of everything in the world that is there to keep them safe. And that can be this like very visceral, um, uh, reassurance to them that, okay, wow, like I am protected. There are so many people who love me. There are so many people who are going to keep me safe. And I think that can really help to tamp down that sense of panic that kids might be feeling.
Can I build on that? Just
Yeah,
because I
go
was
ahead.
part of this gathering that I was just at with resilience and climate change, and there was a panel of Indigenous elders of different traditions, and they just talked about a very similar, like, resourcing also with your ancestors and also with nature as your guide. And so I know this is a practice that comes from like EMDR therapy, like having your resources and just the power of the imagination, but understanding that there's all these things that we can call on, and they can really be part of our the culture we build in our families, right? To make sure that our kids have these refuges to turn to, and whether that's your spiritual tradition, whether that's nature guides, whether that's the people that love them in the world, it's just a really beautiful idea.
Yes. And listen, there are so many cool projects that are out here now. Okay, we have a couple of minutes, but I want to give some tangible things, and those who are on the panel give a thumbs up if you're like, yes, we're in agreement of this. I want to go back to recess. Recess is needed, and not just elementary. All students, some of my last group of students who are now in college, they will tell you that in high school, students want recess. This should be a restorative space, a safe space. A lot of the things that we've heard that can be infused with building relationships and, taking away the anxiety and stress that can be placed upon children, whether it's firsthand, secondary, etc. It's important to have that safe space in recess. We also have some groups advocating for electric school buses, and how can we be more sustainable with the technology, again, the connection to technology and how we're reimagining schools. There also are so many concerns economically from parents. And again, you cannot go wrong with having a community garden, and even, some really cool schools across the US that have a greenhouse or green space that is on the roof of their schools. So we want to go into one more area before we close out on this evening. And I think that I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go to Tara and go to systems level support. I think this is a great way to kind of close us out. What policies, because NPU, we love good policies. What policies or school-based interventions would you most like to see expanded? I think this is a great call to action for parents. So make sure you're taking notes on this, because again, the question centers what policies or school-based interventions does Tara think would be great for us to expand and connect to this era of climate instability? So Tara, it's on you.
All right. Well, that's a big question, and I think there are a lot of different levels of policies that can happen. One thing is making sure that there's solid plans for a school if an emergency or weather-related event does happen, and that they have the resources and networks to crisis response networks. But I want to go back to programs and interventions, which a lot of people have, or a lot of the panelists have already talked about. So making sure that there's time for programs to help children build coping skills, normalize their stressors, learn from each other, have those peer-to-peer interactions. Because one thing that we know with stress is when we're stressed out or we feel isolated, we don't think as well and we don't learn as well. So rather than being reactive and saying, okay, well, the children are all having, they're all acting out. Well, they're acting out oftentimes after disasters because they're stressed. So having programs like that, having youth-led initiatives, that's where, we can really build agency. So providing them with that agency to say there's a climate-related issue that they're really interested in working towards. So building those groups, and so that they can work towards addressing some kind of climate challenge that they would like to. Family initiatives, family interventions that can help caregivers support their children, helping them learn ways to support their children during stressful events. And so one of the things, though, is that there's a lot of policies we can put into place, but schools don't always have the capacity to do this in-house. So partnering with local organizations, nonprofit organizations is one way that you can start to get those actually incorporated into schools. So I will stop there, and I will
That was
send it back over to you, Jason.
a great connection, and it actually was very timely. A lot of resources are inside of the chat. Now, as we get ready to close out here, I'm so excited to be able to connect with those on the panel and those a part of the Climate Mental Health Network, because there's so many ways that we can be connected and move this work forward. Are there tragedies happening every day? Yes, there are. But I hope that people take away hope. I feel a lot of hope and excitement around how we can build together. I really hope that people take that away. We had a lot of people registered for this event on a Thursday evening in football season. School has started back, and to have over 200 people consistently connected to this conversation that was live is phenomenal. So major shout out to everyone who registered, who shared this, all of those behind the scenes. Administrations is a gift. And so everyone who helped to organize, plan, put this together, drive communication, help people to register, making sure all of this went through flawlessly. Thank you all so much for everything that you have done to attribute to this amazing event. Again, please make sure you go to the chat section to complete the survey for those who have stayed on. And let me tell you, I'm really impressed with the number of people who stayed on for this very moment, because I know that you want this survey. So please take some time to complete the survey, let me say, do it now. If you are viewing this live and you can scan this, do the survey now as you hear me talking, because it is also dinner time for many people. And I know that once this closes, you're going to be full throttle into family, loved ones, and of course, hopefully rest, or maybe even enjoying your garden, for those who have a garden and do that. Again, I think we have concluded with all of our announcements, all of the resources. Don't forget, fill out the survey, fill out the form so you can win one of the prizes. And again, thank you all so much for being connected to this conversation. Join us in thanking wherever you are. You can do a round of applause for our amazing panelists. But my friends, we have come to the end. So thank you all so much for being on with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Anya, who is going to close us out with an amazing activity on meditation and centering ourselves.
I'm so grateful and filled with gratitude for all of your work, all the care and the wonderful questions. If we didn't answer them, we will try to get to them afterwards. Please follow up with us, check out the resources. And just as a small offering here, I'd like to ask you to all take a deep breath and let it out. Feel yourself settle into your chair. Feel your shoulders settle down. And feel what's holding you up beneath your chair, your couch, beneath the floor. Is the earth. The earth is holding all of us. It's holding our fear. It's holding our pain. It's holding our care for our children. And we are not separate. We're all part of the earth. So thank you again. I'm folding my hands in gratitude to all of you. Have a great night.
Love Mother Earth, protect Mother Earth. Waterways, mountains, do you know what it's worth? A whole lot. One planet, yeah, that's all that we got. Love Mother Earth, one Mother Earth. Oceans and atmosphere, know what it's worth? A whole lot. This planet, yeah, that's all that we got.
I said, maybe take you a hike, go outside in the scenery and see what it's like. Keeping the emissions low, you could hop on a bike. I've been keeping my city pure and preserving the life.
We know that climate change is real, we can see it in the fire, man. Some don't believe it, I just don't understand it, fam. For those who understand, making community plans. Shout out to you for lending a helping hand.
Meditation, I'm in the space of the stratosphere. We can never thrive if we are hurt in the atmosphere. Missing every commodity when you had it here, but you didn't care when Mother Nature was shedding tears.
Love Mother Earth, protect Mother